Hey, my name is David, and what's happening to me is something I can't easily explain. I don't believe in the supernatural, or at least I didn't. But that all changed when something so terrifying happened to me on a simple road trip that I've never been able to shake the feeling of dread since. Let me give you a bit of background. I'm from Connecticut, and I had been in a long-distance relationship with a girl from Georgia. I made the trip down south often to see her. Honestly, I didn't mind the drives at all. There's something about being alone on the highway that gives you a sense of freedom. A peaceful kind of solitude where it's just you, the open road, and the hum of your engine. I've driven across the country before, all by myself, and I loved every second of it. To save money, I'd usually sleep in my car. It wasn't the most glamorous way to travel, but it was cheap, and it felt like an adventure. Sleeping in your car is like camping, but in a metal tent. I always figured it made me feel tough, roughing it, as they say. I'd recline the seat back, keep the key in the ignition, just in case, and drift off. No curtains or anything for privacy. I never saw the need. I was always fine, but looking back now, maybe I should have. The trip from Connecticut to Georgia usually took 2 days, and I'd always stop somewhere in Virginia or North Carolina to get some sleep. That night, I was driving along the familiar route, exhausted after hours on the road, and decided to stop at a rest area instead of a Love's truck stop like I usually would. It was just more convenient. The rest stop was nearly empty, with only a couple of cars under the dim amber lights, seemingly abandoned in the silence of the night. I parked under a tree, away from the streetlights. The darkness felt like it would give me more privacy, like a little corner where I could disappear for the night. I locked my doors, cracked my window just a little to let in some air, and reclined my seat. This was routine. Nothing about that night felt unusual, at least not at first. I drifted off easily, the quiet hum of the engine giving me the lullaby I needed after a long drive. But then something woke me up. It was a sharp, distinct tapping. At first I thought I'd imagined it, something from my dreams spilling over into the waking world. I lay there, eyes closed, trying to let sleep take me back, but the tapping continued. It wasn't loud, but it was steady, and it sounded like something small, like a pebble, hitting the windshield. Was it raining? Maybe something falling from the tree I was parked under? Or could it be an animal? A squirrel? I didn't want to open my eyes. I was too tired, too comfortable, and too groggy to deal with any of it. But the tapping persisted, irregular and strange enough to make my heart start racing. I had to look. I had to see what was going on. I slowly opened my eyes, not fully sitting up, but lifting my head just enough to peer through the windshield. And what I saw made my blood run cold. There, pressed against the glass, was a face, a woman's face. But something was terribly wrong with it. She was lying on the hood of my car, her face pressed up so close to the windshield that her skin was flattened against the glass. Her eyes were rolled back into her head, showing only the whites, and her mouth was twisted into an impossibly wide grin. Her lips stretched thin, revealing rows of yellowed, decayed teeth. I was frozen, paralyzed with fear. The woman didn't move. She didn't blink, didn't make a sound. Her face was still, locked in that horrific expression. Her skin ghostly pale under the faint light of the street lamp in the distance. Her long black hair hung down, dirty and matted, draping across the hood of my car like a shroud. For what felt like an eternity, I lay there, unable to move, my heart hammering in my chest. I kept telling myself it wasn't real, that I had to be dreaming. But I knew deep down this was no dream. I don't know how long I stayed frozen like that, staring at the woman's grotesque face. Seconds? Minutes? It felt like forever. But eventually, something inside me snapped, and I shot my hand toward the ignition, turning the key with shaking fingers. The engine roared to life, and for a split second, I was terrified the car wouldn't start, like something out of a horror movie, where the engine fails just as the killer is about to strike. But thankfully, the car came to life, and I slammed my foot on the gas. The woman didn't move. Not at first, but as I reversed out of the parking spot, her body slid off the hood and landed on all fours on the pavement, like an animal. I barely had time to process what I was seeing before she let out a piercing, blood-curdling shriek. I floored it. As I sped out of the parking lot, I glanced in my rearview mirror, and for a split second, I saw her chasing after me. She was running on all fours, her long hair flying wildly around her, that sickening grin still plastered across her face. But then I rounded a curve, and she was gone. I didn't stop driving until the sun came up. I don't know how I made it through the rest of that night. My hands were shaking, my heart still pounding in my chest. Every shadow on the road felt like her, lurking just out of sight, waiting to leap at me again. I didn't stop for gas, didn't pull over to rest. I just drove, desperate to put as much distance between myself and that rest stop as possible. When daylight finally broke, the terror that had gripped me began to fade, replaced by a numb disbelief. Had it really happened? Had I really seen what I thought I had? It was easier to tell myself that it was some kind of waking nightmare, my mind playing tricks on me after hours of driving. Maybe I had fallen asleep and dreamed the whole thing. But I knew better. I knew what I had seen. I arrived at my girlfriend's house later that day, completely exhausted, but trying to keep it together. I didn't tell her what had happened, not right away. I didn't want to sound crazy, and part of me hoped that if I didn't talk about it, I could convince myself it hadn't happened. But the next time I made the drive, I didn't stop at a rest stop. I drove straight through, not daring to close my eyes until I was safely in Georgia. For weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Even when I was at home, safe in Connecticut, I felt like there were eyes on me following my every move. I'd catch glimpses of something out of the corner of my eye, just a shadow or a flicker of movement. But when I turned to look, there was nothing there. The nightmare started not long after. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see her face again, that twisted grin pressed against the windshield, her dead eyes staring right through me. Sometimes in the dream, she'd crawl through the glass, pulling herself into the car with me, her hands cold and clammy as they gripped my throat. I stopped sleeping in my car after that. No more road trips, no more nights spent in dimly lit parking lots. But the nightmares continued. And worse, I started hearing the tapping again. It would happen late at night when I was alone in my apartment. At first it was subtle, a faint tapping on the window, like a branch scraping against the glass. But there were no trees outside my window. Then it started happening in other places. The bathroom mirror, the rearview mirror of my car, even the screen of my phone. Tap, tap, always that same sound. One night I was lying in bed, trying to calm my racing heart after another nightmare, when I heard it again. Tap, tap, coming from the window next to my bed. I lay still, frozen with fear, just like I had been that night in the car. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to see her face staring back at me through the glass. But I couldn't help myself. Slowly, I turned my head toward the window. There, pressed against the glass, was a face. Her face. She was back. And this time, she wasn't just a fleeting nightmare. She was here. I don't remember what happened next. I must have blacked out from the fear because when I woke up, it was morning, and the sun was shining through the window. The tapping was gone, and there was no sign of her. But I knew she was still out there. I could feel her presence, lurking just beyond the edge of my awareness, waiting for the right moment to strike again. I don't know why she chose me. I don't know who or what she is. But I do know one thing: she's not done with me. I've stopped taking road trips. I barely leave my apartment. But no matter how far I run or how carefully I hide, I know she'll find me. She always does. So if you ever find yourself on a long road trip, tired and looking for a place to rest, please, don't sleep in your car. Don't stop at a rest area. Find a motel or keep driving until you're somewhere safe. Because once she finds you, she won't let go. And no matter how fast you drive, you'll never be able to escape her.